we can go through them one by one. You are currently muted, but if you want to say something, you can use the group chat function at the end, or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. But we're going to let Lindsay go through it on her end for now. And just so you know, we are recording the program so that everyone can watch it later on the library's website. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, thank you for joining us today. So I just want to say this is Backyard Chickens 101, and my name is Lindsay, and I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes trying to convince you to get backyard chickens. But first, I just had a couple things I wanted to go over. I want to send a huge thank you out to Mia and Naomi and the Wellfleet Public Library for putting this all together. I normally run this workshop at New Farm, which is our retail store in Orleans. But of course, with all of the stuff happening with COVID, we had to shut everything down, including our workshops. So it's just really great to have the opportunity to be able to do this for you, and that is all on them. So thank you guys so much. And I also, so my normal workshop is about an hour and a half long, and I take questions the whole time. I don't exactly know how this is going to go. I'm just going to kind of go for it, and then I'll take questions at the end. I sometimes get distracted and off course. Bear with me. Write down anything that you might be wondering about, and we can go over that at the end. But also, I want you to know that on our website, newfarmstore.com, so again, it's newfarmstore.com, there is most of what I'm going to go over is on there. So I have a chick care basics sheet on there. I have a coop design sheet. I am working currently on a brooder box design that should be posted in the next couple weeks. And then I have a list of all of the breeds that we are getting this year, but there's a ton of them on there with pictures of what the hens will look like and the egg color. So it's really helpful to have. So all those resources are on newfarmstore.com. And if you have any specific questions that either we don't get to or that you come upon down the road, you can always email me, and my email is Lindsay, Lindsay, @newfarmstore.com. So I can help you with individual setups for like your coop. Where should I put this? Lindsay, how should I, build this one particular thing? Or what do you think about mixing these two breeds? Any questions, anytime, just shoot me an email. So we have that down. Okay, let's see. I'm just making sure I'm not forgetting anything. Sorry. I'm going to do this a fair amount because, like I said, I couldn't. Okay. So, all right, I guess we're just going to get started. So the first question is, why chickens? Why would you want to raise backyard chickens? Well, I think backyard chickens are an awesome pet. They're super entertaining. They're really fun. And they produce one of the best composts known to man. So you can use the manure in your garden. You want to let it cure for 2 months first, 2 to 3 months. And then they also give you wonderful eggs, the healthiest eggs. Once you have eggs from your own chickens, you will never want to go back to the grocery store to like yellow, watery, gross eggs again. So there's a lot of benefits to having chickens. One of the most common questions that I get from people that are considering this is, how many birds do I start with? So this kind of is going to depend a lot on your situation. I had one woman call me and she said, Lindsay, I go through a dozen eggs a day sometimes with my family. They just eat a lot of eggs. So for somebody like that, I'd probably say to go for a couple extra birds. But most people, I recommend 4 to 6 is a good starting place. They're very social creatures. They like to be together and they need each other for warmth. So small flocks, people will come in, especially around Easter, and say, I just want to get 1 bird. That's not going to be a happy bird. You don't want to do that. Even 3 is a little bit small because you never know. You might lose a bird and then you're looking for a pair. You only have a pair going into winter. So I think 4 to 6 is a good minimum place to start. The other thing, before you start any adventure, I probably should have mentioned this already. This is like the #1 thing before you start something, is you want to have an awesome book. So this is my favorite. This is an older version. It doesn't look exactly like this. They changed the cover now. but this is Story's Guide to Raising Chickens by Gail Damrow. It is an amazing reference. Anything that you could possibly wonder at 1 o'clock in the morning or anything, don't go on the internet. You will find so much crazy stuff on the internet. Some of it's true, some of it's not true. But if you get a solid reference like this, you never have to wonder if you're getting the right information. So I recommend, you know, for any project that you have, but this is definitely one, and I love this book. There is, if you're not, you know, gonna get super deep into it, there are simpler versions, you know, there's like a Raising Chickens for Kids, which actually has all the pertinent information for that adults would need to, but there's no section on how to slaughter your birds if, you know, you want to go that route. So this Stories Guide will go the full farm route, everything that you possibly need. You can go for a book that'll be a little bit less than that, but this is just my personal favorite. And like, just to show you some things from this book, I love this. This is just a 2-page reference, every breed, and then it has information about whether it's for eggs, meat, ornamental, how well it does foraging, so how much food it can find for itself if it's free ranging versus how much you're gonna end up having to feed it, and then whether it's heat or cold tolerant and its general temperament. So this book is full of wonderful things, and I would recommend a copy for everybody before starting with chickens. So let's see. So picking birds, once you've kind of decided, all right, I'm going to do this, I think this is the right choice for me, I'm going to start with my flock. You can pick your flock size. The next thing you're going to do is pick what kind of birds you want. There are tons of different breeds to choose from. At New Farm, I will only bring in ones that are docile, cold hardy, and that lay well, because the vast majority of our customers are looking for small backyard flocks, and a lot of them have children. So there are some birds that have tendencies to be more aggressive. I won't bring them in. There's some that tend to be a little bit flightier. I also won't bring those guys in, or that don't do well in the cold, because that's a big one. We want to make it through the winter with no additional heat needed or anything. So I've combed through most of the breeds. I add new ones every year, but those are all listed on our website every year, the ones that we have. And I'm just going to go through a couple with you right now, just to kind of give you an idea of the diversity out there. This is probably my all-time favorite, so I hope you guys can see this. This is an Easter egger, okay? The thing that's interesting about Easter eggers, and it's true about a new breed we brought in this year called Green Queens, they are hybrids, so they're a cross between two different breeds. Because of that, they can look totally different. You can have a pure white Easter egger, you can have a black one. Most of them tend to be this, like, you know, in here we've got a lot of brown and orange, a little bit of slate blue on the tail feathers on that particular one. But they come in a bunch of different colors. And the thing that's nice about that is if you did want to do a flock that was just one particular breed, Easter egger is a good one because you can still identify individuals. I think it's really important to be able to identify the individuals in your flock, especially when it comes to, you know, if you have one down the road that's maybe you hear a sneeze a couple times, or somebody's limping, or you're worried about it. It's nice to be able to tell what bird that was. You don't have to go as far as naming them, although a lot of people do, but just to be able to tell them apart. So Easter eggers you can always tell apart, and they also lay blue eggs. I mean, really, you can't go wrong with blue eggs. So that's one of my absolute favorites for starter flocks. Here's another one that I wanted to talk about. This is the golden buff or the red star. There's a bunch of different names for the same bird. This is also a cross. It is mostly it's the absolute best layer that there is. So if you're looking for just pure egg production, these girls are gonna do it for you. They lay large brown eggs, and the only thing about them is they tend to lay so much. Their life expectancy isn't quite as long as some of the other purebred breeds. The other thing that I'll say about these guys is they are a cross between a Rhode Island Red and different breeds. Different hatcheries do it different ways. Rhode Island Reds are a very well-known bird that I actually don't bring into the store because they are one of these birds that tend to have aggressive individuals more often than other breeds. When I say aggressive, I'm not talking about towards you. They're not going to be aggressive towards people. Maybe roosters, but not hens. But they are aggressive towards each other. And they can be kind of nasty sometimes. You don't want to deal with that in a backyard flock. So for the most part, I try to avoid birds like that. And that's why I haven't brought in the Rhode Island Reds. I'm going to upset people. People are going to say, I have 4 of the most friendly Rhode Island Reds ever. That's very true. That can happen. It's individual. So you can have a grumpy, mean bird of any breed. It's just that they tend to be more aggressive than other ones. So, but the other thing that's nice about the Red Star is if you are in a position where you 100% can't have a rooster, you can't have a rooster, you don't want to have to give up a bird that ends up being a rooster, because sexing at the hatchery is about 90% accurate. These guys are 99.9% female if you order a female, because they're actually, their feather color is different. So you have little orangey red ones are female and the males are white at birth. So it's really, really easy for them to tell them apart. All the other birds are sexed by their vent. It's a tricky thing to do. It is about 90% accurate, but you do have to think, well, there's a chance I might get a rooster, and what am I going to do with him? Because a lot of places will let you have hens, but they will not let you have roosters. Neighbors are much less accommodating of roosters, who will crow all the time, not just in the morning, all the time. So moving on from Red Star, this is Black Australorp. So if you look at a bunch of different sources and you try to find what is the #1 most recommended backyard bird for small kids, it's going to be Australorp, like 2 out of 3 times. They're great. They're super friendly. They're really, really pretty. They're all black, but they have sort of like almost an oil slick sheen to their feathers. They lay really well, brown eggs. And so they're super popular. The other ones, I would say same thing. Buff Orpington. Everybody loves the Buff Orpington. This is Cape Cod's favorite bird. I cannot keep them in stock. Everybody wants them. They are so cute as chicks. One thing I should say too is a lot of these birds don't look anything like the adult version as a chick. This bird, the light Brahma, is one of my favorites. These chicks are smoky gray, super dark color. And so I always have to say, this is your light Brahma, and yes, it will end up being white, because otherwise people don't believe me. Here's another one that looks totally different as a chick than it does as an adult. This is one of my favorites. This is a silver gray Dorking. This is a dual purpose bird. So birds are classified by whether they're used predominantly for meat, predominantly for eggs, or both. The Dorking is actually honestly more for meat, but it lays pretty well. And the reason I bring it in is because it lays white eggs. So almost all these guys are gonna lay brown eggs. Besides the Easter egger lays blue, the Green Queen will lay green. The Black Copper Marins lay a really super dark, very, very pretty dark brown egg, but almost every white egg layer is crazy. So the most common white egg layer is the Leghorn. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're besides the hybrid Red Star, they're going to be your grocery store egg laying bird. They lay really, really well, but they're flighty. So what that means is they are a little bit wild. They tend to not want to be handled, not want to be, like have kids playing with them. They don't want to come when they're called. The first year I got them, I had a pair, and I went to put my chickens to bed at night, and I was down 2 birds. It's like, this is interesting. This is the first time that they were out free ranging for most of the day. And I found them in a tree. So that's sort of a description of flighty. The Dorkings lay white eggs, and they're super mellow. But it's also funny because they're these super fat birds that have like a really low carriage, but as chicks, it's the opposite. They have these tall, spindly legs, and they're teeny, 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 and they have an extra toe, which is really, really cute. So I like the Dorking. Two more. Here's one that I figured I should mention because it goes the other direction with aggression. So you have some birds like the red star, the Wyandottes, the barred rocks. Those tend to have more aggressive individuals more often. The salmon favral is the other way. They tend to be the one getting bullied. They are just a little bit wimpy in general. So they can cause trouble if you're trying to mix a flock with a bunch of the more aggressive birds and favrals. I would probably say, hey, let's talk about how we can do this differently, you know, mixing a different way just to kind of give you a better chance of having everybody get along really well. And then the final one I printed, there's so many more of these, but I'm not going to go over every bird, is the Partridge cochin. I wanted to show this one because it's a feathered leg bird. They're super, super fluffy. They do tend to maybe get a little bit messier, but they're so docile and so nice to have a flock like that mixed with salmon favrals. You should be fine. Now, of course, I have to mention that these things, and I think I did already say this actually, but again, any bird, you can end up with the grumpy one. Anytime you can have one that's going to be bossy, that isn't like other birds of that breed. So you do have to kind of be aware of that. And you will have an alpha, no matter what. She'll be the first to come out. She'll be the first one to eat. And sometimes you can have one that's really bossy and rude. And other times you can have one that is so gentle and nice, it's hard to even tell who the alpha is in a flock. I had my favorite alpha of all time I lost this last winter. She was a light Brahma, and I could tell she would not go to bed until all the other hens had gone in. So one day I came out and she was standing, like this is way after she should have already gone in. She was just standing outside. I was like, what is going on? She's acting really funny. Her name was Little because she didn't grow well, which is why I took her home. And it was because this bird had gotten stuck, and I would have never thought, I would have never noticed, but because she was behaving so weird, I walked around and looked, and I did. I found this other bird, and as soon as I put the other bird in, she went right in. She was just waiting to make sure that everybody was together before she went to bed. So they have individual personalities. It gets very addictive, and it is really fun just to kind of get to know all the different birds. Okay, let's see where we are. All right, and then also I should say, if you want me to put together a flock for you, I love that. I love it when people are like, just pick whatever, Lindsay. I want 8 birds, and I will, you know, pick different feather colors, different egg colors. I brought you guys to show you. I hope this doesn't make a mess. These are just eggs I had gotten out from my neighbor. See if you can see them. So we have a black copper Moran down here. We have some of my Dorkings, my Easter egger, everybody mixed in. I love having different egg colors. I love making beautiful cartons for people. So, okay, we've gone over some of the breeds. So now we're gonna move on to the most important part of raising chickens. And I know you're like, let's talk about baby chicks or something really cute and exciting. It's not actually, but it is the most important thing, which is coop design. Pretty much everybody that I talk to that has had chickens either loved them and still has them, or had to get rid of them for some other reason and are sad that they got rid of them, or they hated them. And when I ask them, you know, what was your coop like, or what happened? It's almost always boils down to a poorly designed coop that either was a pain to maintain or that a predator got into and ate their flock. So designing a coop and making sure that you build a really, really strong coop is number one on the list to having a good experience with birds. Chickens are really, really easy. They put themselves away at night. You know, you have to let them out in the morning. You have to close the door at night, but it's not a lot of work. Mucking the coop out should be really, really simple if you design it right. So I'm just going to kind of go through a really basic coop design with you that works really well. Mind you, they have beautiful coops. I mean, you can build something that's like truly stunning. All of these different cute, I've seen planter boxes, and people constantly have different flowers going, glass windows, all the, works. You don't need any of that. You just need it to be strong. Although it is kind of cool to have a pretty coop. So first of all, you have to decide what size to build your coop. That's going to depend on how many birds you want. And I would not say, if you're starting with 4 to 6, don't design it for 4 to 6, because chickens are super addictive and you're going to end up getting more chickens down the road. And you don't want to have to try to build an addition. So build big to start and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room there. For every bird inside, so the coop is going to be 2 parts. It's going to be the actual house and the run. Inside, you're going to want 3 to 4 square feet per bird. Outside in the run, you're going to want 5 to 10 per bird. The 5 to 10 range is because you're going to, if you're free ranging almost all the time, but once in a while you go away for the weekend and you're going to have your chickens penned, 5 is fine. If you are never really free ranging and you're going to keep them permanently penned because you have a ton of hawks or a ton of predators in the area, or no fencing around your yard or something like that, then you're going to want to go closer to 10 square feet per bird in the run. So that would mean a flock of 4, you're looking at a 4 by 4, a flock of 6, a 5 by 5 would be sufficient. But again, I recommend that you build larger because they are definitely addictive. You'll also have less cleaning. You just won't have to clean it out as often if there's more space for them. And you'll have fewer inter-flock conflicts. So like I said, when I was talking about the breeds, you will have a bossier individual. Sometimes they like to pick on each other. If they have more space, that's much less likely to occur. You don't want to pack a bunch of birds in there. They'll just get crabby. So we have these 2 components. So while I was waiting for this to start, I just started sketching out. I like doing in my workshop, sketching out a basic coop. So you can see, I hope this works and you can actually see it. So this part is going to be the actual house, right? That's where the chickens spend the night. It's where their nest boxes are. And the rest is the run, and they're out in the run most of the time during the day, unless they're inside to lay. I try to keep all food stations inside, mostly because you don't want to deal with rodents. Rodents are a pain. Once they come, they're really, really hard to get rid of. You want to just kind of try to avoid that at all costs. If you keep the food stations inside, there'll always be a little bit of mess around the food stations, and that the inside part of your coop is going to have to be 100% rodent proof. The outside part, it doesn't have to be. Some people make it that way, but it can get really expensive. So it's better, at least for the inside part, to be rodent proof. So food inside. Water, I tend to do outside. And the reason being, in the winter, you don't want extra water in your coop. You want to keep the humidity really, really low. And if they splash or if it spills around a little bit, I like to have it outside. When chickens go to bed at night, they're not eating, they're not drinking. They go into this sort of funky state where they're on their roost bars, they're not doing anything. So you don't have to worry about them not having water in the coop, as long as when they get up in the morning, you go and let them out. But again, if you want to put water inside, that's personal preference, and you can do that. But just the only reason that I see is the humidity aspect. So your components of your coop, you're going to have a pop hole. A pop hole is the door that the chickens go out of the coop into the run. The pop hole should be about 12 inches in a square. It can be a little bit smaller than that. I figured that out because my dogs were going up the ramp into my chicken house and eating the chicken food inside. So mine had to be smaller and my hands squeeze a little bit, but they're okay with it. So pop hole, that's gonna have a ladder down to the ramp, and the ladder can get slippery. So I like to put little strips of wood on it just to keep them from sliding if it's raining out. Nest boxes, you need 1 for every 4 birds. Most people think you need a nest box for every bird. You don't. They actually like to use the same box. And a lot of the time, you know, I'll have 4 nest boxes out there and I'll find 8 eggs in one nest box and nothing in any of the other nest boxes. That's totally normal. And they'll pick the one they like the best, and they'll just occasionally squawk at each other if one is in their favorite nest box and they want to use it, or sometimes go in together, which is pretty amusing. So the nest boxes, one tip about that I learned early on, if you're building a wooden coop and your nest boxes are wood, line them with, I honestly use plant saucers, a plastic plant saucer. Put the plastic plant saucer in the bottom of the nest box and then put your pine shavings on top of it so the hens can't feel it. But what happens is if your birds happen to crack an egg by accident, or they peck it open on purpose, because they will learn to do that. You want to try not to let them learn that. But if they do, and the egg sort of melts on a summer day into the wooden nest box, it's really gross. So if you line it, it's really easy to keep it clean. And just plastic plant saucers, super cheap and easy. Roost bars. You're gonna have roost bars inside your coop as well. So I just use 2x4, short end up. Really, really simple and cheap. You can also use like sticks from outside, branches that are about the same width. That's fine. They're not picky. I find branches split sometimes, but 2x4s normally do pretty well. You're going to have 12 inches of 2x4 per bird. And then don't put them really close together if you're doing multiple runs of them. Give it a good 12 to 18 inches in between so that they can't get to each other from the 2 bars up. Sometimes people will stagger them like a ladder. That works really well too. Okay, so food and water we talked about. You'll have water outside. I like raising the water, so I put a little note on that just so it doesn't get so many pine shavings in it. You can use a saucer flipped upside down or a bowl flipped upside down to raise that up, or they make platforms for it. Ventilation. This is one really, really important thing. So there's the difference between a draft and ventilation. You want there to be a well-ventilated coop with no drafts. What that means is up above where they're roosting at night, you're going to want a fair amount of air movement, more than you think. It shouldn't get too cobwebby in there. You should have enough air movement that it's, you know, constantly flushing any like smells or anything like that out. You want to have that air moving, especially in the winter. It's important not to close that up. Everybody's instinct the first time it gets cold is, oh, let's go and close off the chickens. They're going to get cold. That's totally opposite. You really, really want to keep that ventilation going in the winter, because what I mentioned before with the water, you want that coop to be really, really dry. If the chickens produce a fair amount of moisture just sitting on the bars roosting at night, that's got to go up and out so that they don't get frostbite, because otherwise they can get frostbite on their comb, is the little red part on the top, and their wattles, and that can be avoided just by having it be dry. So ventilation, no drafts though. A draft is something that's actually going to move their feathers, like their level where they're roosting at night. You don't want any air that's like breaking that barrier, because they'll keep their feathers fluffed so that they have the little ball of warmth. And other than that, these birds that we're talking about, you don't have to add heat in the winter for any of them. Even the coldest nights, they don't need it. The one exception would be if you notice an individual doesn't really seem right, they might be a little sick, you might have had some health concerns with them earlier. For a bird like that, I'd say bring it in, don't risk it if it's going to be super, super, super cold. But other than that, they don't need anything. The one thing that you do have to worry about with chickens, and people don't think about this at all, is the heat. They do not do well in the heat. They can't be separated from their water. They can die really quickly when it gets warm. So when you're thinking about where to situate your coop, try to find somewhere that's at least seasonally shaded in the summer. I love having deciduous trees because in the winter they get the sun, but in the summer they're shaded when they need that cool shade. Okay, let's see. So, and then the other thing components of the coop is locks galore. We want to keep out, basically you design your coop to keep out raccoons, and nothing else can get in as long as raccoons can. They're the hardest. Raccoons are really smart and they can do anything that's a simple one-step thing. So I really like having different types of locks. I just went before this workshop and grabbed these off my coop. I have one of these, and then I have a different locks that drop in, and then this is on the door. I have carabiners, and then I have a bolt latch. So multiple locks will keep raccoons out, but also don't make it hard for yourself. Don't have a combination lock that you're out there trying to do. You know, after you get home from a party, you got to put the chickens away. Keep it simple for you, just one step up so that you can deter raccoons. With coops, back to this one, this is like the most simple design ever, but this is your coop. If this whole back area, so you can see here, the run is over here with a person-sized door. This is important. You want to be able to walk in there, clean it out, get the feed, get the water, see the birds, just walk in, keep it easy. Don't design something that's really short. But the back side of this, there should be doors that open. If you have big doors in the back, what you can do is take your wheelbarrow around the back and then just pull all the pine shavings out from it, and then you're off. Super, super easy. Coops that are not designed well, you're trying to like dig in there to pull out a liner, or like ducking to try. Don't do that to yourself. Simple, think really simple. Big doors open, pull all the pine shavings out. You know, get a wheelbarrow, get it high up enough so that you can put a wheelbarrow right under there, straight to the wheelbarrow and off. It should take you less than 5 minutes to clean your coop if it's designed well. That's the inside part. The outside part might take a little bit longer, but it also doesn't need to be done as regularly. I wish I could just stop and take a break and ask you guys if you have questions about this, because normally I do this, but I guess just write them down and we'll do it at the end. Okay, so designing that, bedding, my favorite is pine shavings, kiln dried pine shavings. You don't want hay. I don't like, because it's a natural agricultural product. It has residual moisture in it. It can lead to molds and mildews. That's not good for chickens' respiratory tracts. They have really sensitive respiratory tracts. It's the other reason why you don't want to use woods that have more volatile oils like cedar. It's not good for their breathing. Kiln dried pine shavings are great. You can use them in the run. You can use them in the coop. You can use them in the nesting box. You can put a little bit of hay or pine, straw in your nesting box if you want. They will make sort of cute, basic nests, but you will just want to keep that cleaned and changed regularly. Some people use sand. Sand works pretty well. It's heavy. It doesn't hold as much heat as pine shavings do in the winter, so it won't keep the coop quite as clean, but it definitely makes separating out the poop if you're composting a lot easier, because pine shavings are super acidic. So if you're composting the waste, you're gonna need to adjust for that if you have pine shavings mixed in there. Okay, how are we doing in time? We've got 10 minutes. So I'm going to go over predators quickly. There's the 3 big predators. We'll start with raccoons because I've already mentioned them. So when you're building a coop to protect it from raccoons, you really, really want to think strong. Raccoons are super strong and they're very dexterous. So they can unlock simple latches. They can rip chicken wire apart. You want to think fortress, make things really, really strong. Don't use half rotting wood. They'll find the weak points and get in there. Hardware cloth, I recommend for using on all windows, anything that's going to be open all the time. So seasonally, your windows will be open all the time. You'll want to cover that with hardware cloth. Your vents, what I talked about with up top, you're going to want all of your venting, have that be hardware cloth. The run, you can do chicken wire, but chicken wire will not stop rodents and it will not stop raccoons. So hardware cloth, 1/2 inch is normally sufficient. 1/4 inch you can go with, but it gets a lot more expensive. So 1/2 inch hardware cloth on everything inside. Let's see, raccoons. Okay, so that's it for raccoons. Hardware cloth, extra, extra strong, build everything extra strong. Coyotes and foxes, they tend to dig under the run. So they'll get in under the run. They'll also come more during the day. So you need to be a little bit careful with them. They're easier to deter though, because they do mostly just come in from the bottom. You can either put a full bottom on your run, so made out of chicken wire, that's fine, that's strong enough for them. Or you can dig around the outside of your run and drop it like 18 inches down, and that should deter foxes and coyotes. And then the last one, this is the hardest one, and if you free range, you just have to accept, like, you will probably take hawk losses from hawks. I mean, they will find your chickens and hang out and wait. So, but they can't get through chicken wire either. They can't get through any basic netting as long as there's not any big holes in it. So if you have an outdoor pen, you're definitely going to want to cover that with something that will keep it hawk proof. And then for protecting free ranging birds, chickens, when they see shadows, they run. Like, they do have that instinct. So it's good to have mid-level shrub habitat, things they can go hide under. And then songbirds will thank you too. Really important component for those guys as well. So I would plant things around your yard, places where they can go. They'll hide under a deck if that's possible. They will find places. And then if you are only free ranging for certain times, pick the sunny days because they can see the shadows. So on cloudy days, there's no indication that a hawk is coming for them. So if you're just going to pick and choose, I would say sunny days, or chickens will instinctively go in every night when the sun starts to go down. So if you want to limit the amount of time, or for like my house, my husband goes nuts when the chickens start to eat at his new plantings. So I'll let them out like 6 o'clock in the evening this time of year. They'll be out for an hour and then they'll put themselves in. So that sort of limits their exposure and limits their damage to the yard, because they do like to eat everything. Okay, this is the most fun part. So we're gonna quickly go over chick care basics. Really simple to take care of the baby birds. So when the baby birds arrive at new farm, they are 2 days old. I teach them how to drink and eat, so you don't have to worry about that part. What you'll do is you'll make a brooder box for them. So this is where they're going to live for the first 4 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks if it's like March, April that you're getting your birds, and closer to 4 if you're getting them in May or June. In your brooder box, you're going to have a heat plate. These are the best invention in chicken raising ever. They replace the 250 watt heat lamps that are a huge energy drain and a huge fire hazard. These guys are fabulous. They run at 22 watts. You don't worry about changing temperature. There's only the one temperature. The only thing that you do is you raise them up. They have their own little stilts, and underneath there's a little clamp, and you just pull it, raise the panel up a little bit each week as the chicks grow, and you don't worry about temperature at all. They are rated down to 50 degrees too. So if you want to keep them in a basement or a garage, this will provide plenty of heat, and you don't have to worry about having any additional heat source. So that's the most important thing in your brooder box. They make, this is a chick waterer. This is another style. This is a nipple style. I like these. The birds will just peck at them and the water comes out this way. They're really super clean. These guys, once you put the pine shavings in after 3 or 4 days, the pine shavings will fill up in there. But both styles work. And if you put these on a flipped over plant saucer, that helps keep them cleaner. So you'll have some type of water, and then this is a feeder. Really basic. Keeps them from pooping in the food. It just there's 8 little holes. If you have a huge amount of chicks, you might want to get 2 of everything, but this is sufficient for most starter flocks. And then they'll have their food. So their food is a starter mash. It's a kind of like almost in between flour and sand. It's really, really finely mashed. They will be on that for the first 2 weeks. You just keep their food filled, you keep their water filled, you don't worry about anything with that. After 2 weeks, you can start giving them treats. At that point, they're going to need grit. So this is a little jar of grit. It's basically just crushed rock. And what it does is it goes into their crop and it acts as their teeth, just helps them to break down the things that you'll give them. So after 2 weeks, they can start getting mealworms. You can give them little pieces of, you know, spinach or cheese. I like giving them grated cheese. So they can have things like that. But when they do need to break those foods down, because the mash is already basically broken down for them, that's when they need grit. So the grit you can give in a little separate container and you just keep that full. Keep cleaning the pine shavings out of it because they will make a mess. But they'll have that. And then when they get older, you'll move up to poultry grit, which is just bigger crushed rocks. So I really like to make brooder boxes out of cardboard boxes. I know it's really, really simple, but that's why I like it. It's inexpensive, it's easy. Almost everyone has cardboard boxes lying around or they're easy to get. Do not do it if you're going to use a heat lamp, obviously, because that's a big fire hazard risk, but with these panels, it's safe as safe can be. Get a big cardboard box and you line it with thick plastic. So you can either use greenhouse plastic. I actually just made one using a contractor trash bag, not a regular trash bag, it's too thin, but the contractor ones that are extra thick. You'll just tape that around the bottom, bring it up a little bit so that pine shavings can't flick out if there's a gap in the box. And you'll just line the whole bottom and then just surround the whole thing with tape just to keep pine shavings from going in the cracks there. And that works really well. Then when they get bigger, you can just put another box next to the original box, cut a hole in both sides of the box, and immediately you have an upgraded, bigger house, but you didn't have to use that room when you didn't need it. They grow pretty quickly, but for the first 2 weeks, they don't need much space at all. And you don't want to have, you know, something that could house a 6-week-old chick for the first 2 or 3 weeks when you don't need that much space. So I like using cardboard boxes. You can also use plastic totes though. People have made them out of wood. The one that we have at New Farm is made out of, we had an old wood table that we didn't need and then we just put a thing around it. So you can get creative with your brooder box. About 2 weeks old, they'll start to fly out. So you'll have to put a lid on it, and you would probably want to put a lid on it earlier. A really, really safe lid if you have animals around the house. Although I would honestly say just keep the birds in a room that you can just close the door and keep them separated because you don't want to have to worry about that. Oh, let's see. I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anything. Okay. One other note about brooder box is for the first 3 to 4 days, I line them with paper towel. The birds come in and they kind of just peck around. They don't really know what's food, what's poop, what's pine shavings, just sort of figuring it all out. They figure it out pretty quickly, but you don't want them to ingest a bunch of pine shavings while they're in that process. So paper towel is really clear where their food stations are, and after 4 or 5 days of being on paper towel, you can put in the pine shavings, which are a lot easier to keep clean. Paper towel, you're going to want to change every day. Pine shavings, maybe once a week. Okay, let me make sure that I have covered this. Also, I should note we have a rental program on our heat plates. The heat plates are more expensive to buy outright than a heat lamp, but because I'm really, really adamant about making sure everybody is safe, their family and their chicks are safe, we have a heat plate rental for $20. You can rent it for the time that you need it for your birds if you do not want to purchase it outright. Okay, I have hit my 45-minute limit and we haven't talked about nutrition or treats, but I guess I can do it really, really quick because it is pretty simple. So we sell 3 different kinds of food at the store. We sell organic, non-GMO, and conventional. The things that differ in feed, there's a different ration for each different life stage, and mostly what's changing is going to be protein content, calcium content, and the size of the particles of the food. So for chick starter, it's going to be a really, really small particle, really high protein, really low calcium because they're not laying, so they don't need that extra calcium. And then as it goes towards a laying food, you have a bigger pellet, you have more calcium to help with all that egg production, and you don't need them to grow as fast, so the protein content's going to go down. You don't have to worry about this at all. You just have to come in and say, Lindsay, I have 8-week-old birds. What should I be feeding? And I say, do you want conventional, non-GMO, or organic? And I'll get you the right food. But just to let you know, like how I'm choosing the right food for you at the point, that's what we're looking for. Oyster shells are a supplement. You're going to want to keep oyster shells when you have hens that are laying. Sometimes they need additional calcium, that's not in the food. And you want to just have that available to individuals that need it. So that's free choice, separate container. Just keep it there once they start laying, which is about 5-6 months old, depending on the bird. That grit that I talked about with the chicks, the hens need it as well. It's a bigger size, but you're going to have that free choice separate container. If they're free ranging, most of the time you probably don't need grit. They'll probably find it in your yard. But if you're keeping your hens permanently penned, definitely make sure. And there's no harm in having it. So even if you have free ranging birds, if they're not going to use it if they don't need it. So you can just have that in a separate container. A last supplement is salt. They don't need very much. Kelp works great. And it also supplies other vitamins and minerals. It is optional, although you will notice once your hens start laying, if you add a little bit of kelp, or if you give them really any green vegetable, it's going to make those yolks so dark and beautiful. And that's all just good, healthy stuff going to you through the eggs. So it definitely makes sense to feed them lots of extra greens. For the main treats, scratch is the most common treat. That is a combination of corn and barley typically. There's different ways that they do it, but our scratch is corn and barley. It is high energy, low protein. Think of it like candy. You can use it for training them, but you don't want to give them more than what they can eat in about 15 minutes. And then when their energy needs are down in the summer, you can sub in oats instead of corn. Corn will help them stay warm in the winter, so it's nice to give them a handful right before they go to bed at night, but oats are better in the summer when you don't want them to be too hot. Fresh fruits and veggies, definitely. Lots of greens for those dark yolks and the kelp. Milk is good to boost calcium. Cheese, yogurt, they love that stuff. Things you want to stay away from, raw potato peels, onions, garlic, and fish, because that will impart a flavor in the eggs and it will be yucky. Avocados, any food that's spoiled or rotten, fried foods are a no-no, anything with added salt or sugar. And chickens cannot have caffeine or alcohol. Very sad, major bummer, but it's true. Okay, I feel like we should go to questions because all I haven't covered is egg care. And honestly, you guys just text me, like write me any questions you have and I can answer anything. I know that I didn't leave you a whole lot of time, but my email again is lindsay@newfarmstore.com, LINDSAY, and email me anything.
Do we have time to read a few questions now, Lindsay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm just going to go in order from what's in the chat, and you can call a stop whenever you're out of time. But okay. The first one was how much work a day to keep chickens? Okay, so almost none. So what you're going to do on a daily basis is you're going to go outside in the morning, open the house so that they can go out into the yard. At that point, you can collect eggs, although depending on how many birds you have, you don't normally need to collect eggs more than once a day, and I like collecting them in the evening, but it is sort of personal preference. And just make sure their food is filled up and their water is filled up, and that's it. So at night, you're going to do the reverse. You're going to go, close the house and grab the eggs if you haven't gotten them already, and they're good. They put themselves away, so that makes it really easy. For maintaining the coop, if you've designed your coop right, like I said, it's probably 5 minutes to clean it out. Once a year, twice a year, I'll do like a deep cleaning. Normally before the first snow, I'll do a really deep cleaning, and then in the springtime, I'll do a deep cleaning, and that takes some time. But I'll pull everything out. I get a shop vac. I
clean really thoroughly, but it's really, really not very much work at all. Not like a dog or a cat or anything, less than that.
Awesome. I think you covered how to keep away predators. The question after that was, what's the author's name of the book that you held up at the beginning?
Gail Damerow. So it's Gail Damerow. And she has written a health handbook. She's written a bunch of stuff about chickens. She's really phenomenal.
Thank you. Is it safe to keep the brooder box in an unheated basement in the summer to keep mess inside to a minimum?
Yes, definitely. Just as long as it's over 50 degrees. And that is a good idea. I should have mentioned that the babies are super dusty, super. So wherever you decide to have them, you should cover things that you care about with just like a sheet or an old towel, or have them in a smaller space so it's easier to keep that dust confined. A garage works, a basement works, but yeah, plan on a lot of dust produced from the babies.
Do you recommend keeping chicks inside and not in the coop to start?
I'm not sure I understand the question 100%. So like when the babies first go outside, I'm hoping this is what you're asking. If it's not, just email me. But so when I first put my birds outside, they're still little, and that ramp is built for adult birds. So it's pretty, you know, it's a big deal for them to start learning the ramp. So the first week, I'll keep them completely locked in the house. After that, I'll let them out, but I'll make sure that at night I go and help them. A lot of times they'll get sort of stranded in the coop. They'll just form a ball at night instead of going back in, and you have to pick them up one by one and put them in the house. That learning process takes anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. Was my slowest walk ever. I'm like, guys, when are we gonna get this? Individually picking birds up every night and sticking them in was not fun, but normally they learn pretty quick. But yeah, maybe a week, just having them outside, but not in the outside run part yet.
Awesome. Okay, the next question was, how long from getting chicks to getting eggs?
5 to 6 months.
How much would you estimate the cost is to get started with all supplies, coop, chicks, food, etc.?
So the most expensive component by far is the coop. And the other stuff is really little to get started with chicks. You know, a $20 heat plate rental. The feeders and waters are about $6 each. If you use a cardboard box, you know, that's free. One garbage bag. The chick grid is $10. That's really, really not too much. The coops can get really expensive though, especially if it's done right. What I would say is people have gotten really creative about finding ways to use what they have. So if you have a shed that you don't use very often, it's not too hard to put hardware cloth behind the windows and put some roost bars up and put some nest boxes in. And that would be a really inexpensive way to make your coop. If you're starting from scratch and you're building everything, it can definitely get more expensive.
And the last question that I have in the chat is, if not keeping hens over winter, what do you do with them?
If you're not keeping them over winter, what do you mean? Like if you're leaving for the winter?
Let's see. That was asked by David, and I'm going to unmute him so he can clarify. David, do you want to clarify your question?
Sorry, my family's somewhere.
Yeah. Suppose you go away for a month.
Oh, okay. So if you go away for a month, you're definitely going to need to find somebody to watch them, because those basic daily things will need to be done. You're going to have someone come in the morning and at night, just to let them out in the morning, put them away at night, and get the eggs. And you want to just clean it really well before, so they don't have to deal with that part. But they've got to make sure the food and water is good to go.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions? That was all that was in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you do, feel free to email me. And I know I went kind of quickly through some of it, but I'm here and available anytime for any additional questions. Or if you want me to give you some advice on how to make a coop or where to put your coop or what kind of breed would work for your situation.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. This was wonderful. We really enjoyed having you as part of our program today.
Thank you so much.
Everyone can also contact the Wellfleet Public Library for more information or resources. And thank you all for coming.
Okay, take care.
Have a good day, everyone.